Hi, welcome back to the next part of the Deadly Affirmations video novel. We're going to read the very first part, I'm there, of Chapter 8, which is called Your Excuses Are History. And so we'll see what Patience Murphy is up to. So if you get comfy, we'll begin. Here we go. Patience woke up and looked over at her alarm clock. It was set for 5:30, and the little yellow digital lights showed that the time was 5:23. She decided with very little argument with herself that she should just get up. She dragged herself into the bathroom. It was garbage day, and Abraxas' little box needed to be dumped and refilled with litter. That disgusting job accomplished, Patience put her efforts into getting herself ready for work. Half an hour later, clean as a whistle, she walked back into her bedroom to find something to wear. She decided that the cute black crewneck sleeveless dress with its skinny little belt and the pleated horizontally striped skirt would be just the thing. She found a cropped white open front cardigan sweater in case she got cold, and her black Sam Edelman ankle strap sandals. Ready on the outside, she went into the kitchen to attend to her inner patients. Nothing seemed to strike her fancy until she'd rummaged in the freezer and found a box of waffles. She took one out of the box and slipped it into the toaster, and a minute later, when it was brown and crispy and had just popped out of its slot, she laid it on a paper towel and slathered it with peanut butter. It was still too hot to eat. The peanut butter was sensually melting into the depressions, and Patience took the time to pour herself a glass of orange juice. By then her breakfast was cool enough to eat, and she devoured it, leaning against the kitchen counter, enjoying it thoroughly. After she had cleaned up from her breakfast, she looked in the refrigerator, found the bowl of chicken salad she had left over from dinner the night before, grabbed a little plastic tub and spooned the chicken salad in. She washed the bowl and set it in the rack to dry. She looked in the fruit bowl and found a pear that was just ripe. Throwing these two in a paper bag, she was almost ready to leave for work. She'd almost forgotten her daily guide and affirmation. She walked back into the bedroom and grabbed the book and box of cards. She found her page for the day. If you really want to, you can take that next tiny step. That's right. Just one more little step, that's all it takes. Take it, see what happens. Then consider the progress that you've made. Adjust your strategy and fine-tune your tactics. And after you've done all of that, take another tiny step. Her affirmation for today? Number 87. I am focused and engaged in the task at hand. She put the cards back into the box and the book and the box back onto her bedside table. As she opened the back door to leave, she saw Braxis staring at her. "Oops, Brax," she said to the big old cat, "I almost forgot." And she filled the cat's food dish with kibble and his other dish with fresh water, adding a couple of ice cubes, just the way he liked it. Patience drove to Thorough Solutions, took her lunch bag to the break room and put it in the refrigerator, and got to her desk a little before 9. Since Robbie Daniels had left, there was just more work for everyone. The bosses hadn't filled Robbie's vacancy yet. Patience was beginning to get the nagging feeling that they would never replace Robbie in the office if the office just kept humming along without him. Patience spent 2.5 hours plugging away at piles and piles of files and then decided that she needed a cup of coffee, so she headed for the break room. As she entered the little beige-walled room, Betty, what's-her-name, was tossing something into the trash. Patience smiled a hello, and Betty smiled back. The two did not speak, and Betty seemed in a hurry to get back to work. Betty's desk was at the other end of the office, and she and Patience had a nodding relationship at best. Patience made a cup of Kona in her mug from the Keurig machine. It was weak and almost tasteless, but it was coffee. And then walked to the trash can to throw the K-cup away. When she looked into the trash can, she saw a half-eaten pear in a little plastic container that had the dregs of tuna or chicken salad in it. This looked to Patience a lot like what she had packed for lunch. Patience walked to the fridge and looked inside. Her little lunch was gone. Betty, that bitch, had eaten it. And it wasn't even noon, that pig! Patience carefully added a packet of stevia and a teaspoon or so of French vanilla creamer to her coffee and took it back to her desk. She spent the rest of the workday finishing most of the files in her desk, simmering and waiting to take her revenge. She sat at her desk until Betty walked toward the office door to leave. When she'd left, Patience put her work away and followed her out of the building. Betty went to the corner and waited at the bus stop, spending the time completely engrossed in her phone. When the bus came, Betty got on and found a seat at the front of the bus. Patience walked down the aisle, pointedly looking away from Betty, and took a seat at the very back. Betty lived about 5 miles from work on the south side of River City. She got off the bus and began walking past little prefab houses that hadn't cost much when they had been built, but which were now worth a couple of $100,000 apiece. Betty walked head down, her phone her only focus. Patience walked about half a block behind her. 5 minutes later, Betty turned up a sidewalk, went to the front door of a bright yellow cape, found her key, and went inside. Patience walked past the sidewalk, past the driveway that was nothing more than two parallel lines of concrete, and on past the hedge that bordered the driveway. She kept walking for another block before turning left, and after another block left again, and then back to the street where the bus had left her off. She caught the bus back to Thorough Solutions and then drove herself home. When Patience got home, she fed the cat, slipped into her jammies, and ordered a pepperoni pizza. When it came, she rolled a joint and watched the beginning of season 2 of Outlander on Netflix. She managed to get through 3 episodes, but while Jamie and Claire's plan to stop Culloden was moving along, Patience fell asleep. By the time Patience had gotten to work on Monday morning, Weezie Hayes had made and eaten her breakfast, cleaned the dishes, and was putting the Sunday paper into Bruno's cage. She read the headlines from the day before and was reminded that there were now 4 murders. Weezie was fascinated. She just knew that these dead people were connected somehow, but for the life of her, she couldn't guess how. But there was a murderer walking the streets of River City. She would have to watch all of the people she saw out on the street very carefully. There would be clues. Weezie absolutely loved to read, and lately she had discovered Patricia Cornwell's medical examiner, Kay Scarpetta. She was about halfway through the first book in the series, Post-Mortem, where Kay uses forensic evidence to find a serial killer, a strangler. The librarian had recommended Cornwell's books after seeing that Weezie had checked out The Bone Collector and Silence of the Lambs. Weezie checked every night to make sure that her windows were locked and slept with a light on now, especially since the newspaper was reporting murder after murder after murder after murder. Weezie spent the day vacuuming and dusting, taking a break for lunch, a nice salad of iceberg lettuce and Thousand Island dressing that she made herself, ketchup, mayo, pickle relish, garlic salt, onion salt, easy as pie. She made herself a cup of English afternoon tea, Twinings, since it was all she could get at Hoffman's. A friend in England had sent her a box of Harney and Sons Scottish afternoon tea bags, but she had used those up last month and relaxed for a while. By the time that Patience had followed Betty home, Weezie was finished with her daily chores and was ready to listen to reruns of A Prairie Home Companion on the radio while she worked on a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle of a mountain in Colorado. She didn't like the talking part of A Prairie Home Companion, but Bruno loved the music and would try to sing along to any song with a clarinet. Now that was entertainment. Meanwhile, across town on that Monday morning, a college student, home for a visit, picked up the morning paper and read about a terrible murder. Lee was sipping a cup of hot chocolate and idly pushing a forkful of scrambled eggs around on her plate. She had been born and raised in R.C. and had never even heard of anyone in town dying a violent death. Sure, there had been car wrecks and house fires and the occasional exploding meth lab, but this death was different. It was a murder. "Mom," Lee asked, "did you see this article about the murder?" Her mother sighed. "River City has always been such a peaceful place. I suppose we had to catch up with the rest of the world sooner or later." "It's so terrible," Lee said in a small, sad voice. "But at least it's only one." "Oh, no, baby," her mother said. "This is the 4th unnatural death within a week." And her mother proceeded to tell Lee about the explosion, the deadly robbery, and the drug overdose. "Oh, my," Lee said. "Finish your breakfast, Lee," her mother said. "I've got to get to work." After her mother left for work, Lee got onto her laptop and found the website for the River City Observer and Bulletin. There was not much information in the news stories other than who, where, when, what happened, and how. There were 4 big holes where the whys should have been. The stories did offer information on means. The explosion was triggered by a piece of cloth stuffed in Billy Simpson's car's gas tank and set alight. Robbie Daniels' larynx was crushed and there was blunt force trauma to his head. Johnny Schobert smoked something he never should have, and Donnie Johnson succumbed to internal bleeding as a result of a crushed artery. The stories also informed the reader about opportunity. Billy sitting in his car in a parking lot, lost in texting apparently. Robbie alone in a dark garage late at night. Johnny taking drugs, who knew what in them, and Donnie mugged after too much alcohol in the bad part of town. Unfortunately, none of the stories told much about why these men would have died. Robbie was robbed, okay. Billy was blown up by a vindictive girlfriend. Lee remembered when Michael dumped her and how she wanted to burn him and his car up. Johnny was just a terrible accident, the result of a bad reaction to bad drugs and an unscrupulous drug dealer. Donnie said or did the wrong thing to the wrong person. There seemed to be no connection between the deaths. Except that people in River City didn't just die like any of these men. Lee felt that in her bones.